coming up right now, we have Alan Mendenhall. He's with the Blackstone and Burke Center for Law and Liberty. He's the Associate Dean and Executive Director. Good afternoon, Alan.
Hi, Donna. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm thankful for the rain.
Oh, so you have rain right now in Montgomery?
Well, I can't actually tell. The windows are dark, so I can't see out, but I know it's coming.
Yeah, we've been pretty hard hit here with the drought, and I'm sure you guys have down there as well. But
Yeah,
especially here in DeKalb County with this farming country, so we're just happy. We're tickled to death. But we're telling folks to be careful out there because no rain on the roads for quite a while does build up a residue. So make sure you're careful out there. Well,
that's
you,
good to know.
well, you and I have some things we want to talk about today. Very interesting, and about Donald Trump and
hmm
President-elect Donald Trump and his choosing of his cabinet. So, what are your thoughts about that, and what's the latest news?
Well, first of all, I think it's very interesting the way he's handling it. Being a sort of celebrity apprentice television host, he adds a little bit of showmanship and drama to his
Yeah.
selection. I know he tweeted the other day that that only he knows the finalists.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that term finalist
Yeah.
because it sort of suggests that you're the finalist on the Donald Trump show, which is a sort of a funny way of thinking about your presidential cabinet picks. But of course, anybody he picks has to be approved of by the Senate. The pick of Sessions for Attorney General will have to be he'll have to be confirmed by the Senate. And
Mm-hmm.
Betsy Devos was named last week as his choice for Secretary of Education. His White House Chief of Staff is Reince Priebus, and his ambassador to the United Nations has been Nikki Haley, Governor of South Carolina.
That was a shock to me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because he had already been under some accusations of just selecting white men with his choice of not only Priebus but with Steve Bannon as the who was the chief executive officer of the presidential campaign, but to name him as the chief strategist and senior counselor for the administration. So between Priebus and Bannon and Sessions, I think there was some clamoring for a little bit of diversity, and I think Betsy DeVos and Nikki Haley filled that fairly well. But Nikki Haley is interesting in that she was a critic of Trump on the campaign trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a huge critic. I mean, pretty rough things she said there about him. So, what does that say to you about his character that he would even consider her?
Well, I think between her and the rumors about Mitt Romney being considered for a variety of positions, but I think the one that's being talked about the most is Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it shows that he's willing to welcome former rivals. He's willing to let bygones be bygones, and I think Donald Trump recognizes that things that get said on the campaign trail get said on the campaign trail, and so he's not going to hold grudges against everybody. Now, it does seem as though the people he's choosing not to hold a grudge against are coming from outside of Washington. Although Romney has a lot of ties to Washington, and as does Nikki Haley, they're not Washington insiders. They come from positions as governors, and so they have executive experience, and they have experience in the private sector as well.
Mm-hmm. And then Mitt Romney being a very successful businessman.
That's correct, and
Mm-hmm.
I think Trump can respect the businessmen in Mitt Romney, and is looking for people from the private sector before he's looking for people that have just been on Capitol Hill their whole lives.
And he hired people in his businesses the same way. Whether he
Well, he
really
did.
liked them or not, it had to be successful and have a proven track record.
That's right. And that's, Trump came into this election as an outsider, running a mostly self-funded campaign. He was up against establishment Republicans and basically the establishment media, the mainstream media, and he had to overcome those hurdles. So it makes a lot of sense that as an outsider candidate, he would select outsider cabinet positions. But some of the names getting thrown around are fairly interesting. I've even heard that he's looking at a Democratic representative from Hawaii named Tulsi Gabbard, who was actually a Bernie Sanders supporter, and she was a female combat veteran, but she has been very critical of some of the foreign policy under the last two administrations, and has said some things that align with some of the things Trump said in his debates. So who knows where Trump will go? He's apparently interviewing a lot of people. He apparently interviewed General Petraeus today. So there's just a lot of unknowns out there. I think probably more unknowns with Trump than there would be with any other president-elect.
Absolutely. Now, Betsy DeVos, what are your thoughts about her? Was she a Common Core person or not? I've heard two different things. I've heard she was, and I've heard she wasn't.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a matter of debate. She has come out and said that she was not a supporter of Common Core, but she sat on the boards of several foundations and corporations, and apparently one of those did advocate for Common Core. But if she says she's against it, this is one of those where she's involved in so many different things that I sort of take her word on this one. She's been really behind school vouchers and tax credits to businesses that give private school scholarships and supporting school choice. And I would suspect that as a leader in the Trump administration, she would be supporting things like scholarship tax credit programs that allow individuals and corporations to receive tax credits in exchange for donations made to private schools and to scholarships. And she probably will support some forms of school vouchers and open enrollment laws, charter schools, magnet schools, homeschooling, maybe education savings accounts, individual tax credits, and deductions for educational expenses, these sorts of things. So those are generally things that I think are pretty good. She's been a philanthropist for most of her life, and has supported just numerous causes. And she comes from an extremely wealthy family. Her father was an industrialist and founded a company called Prince Corporation, and then she married someone who was extremely wealthy as well. And her brother founded Blackwater, which is the private security firm that got a lot of attention about 15 years ago or so. So she's just been very involved in a lot of different things.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of success and also a lot of community outreach in her. So
exactly.
That may be another reason.
I mean, my personal favorite choice for that position was Larry Arnn, who's the president of Hillsdale College. He's someone I know and someone I trust with issues of education. But I think Betsy DeVos will do a good job. I think she is a good pick, and she does give a nice female touch to the office, which is something I think Trump really did need in his next pick. So as a Secretary of Education, I think she would do a good job.
Well, what are your thoughts about Ben Carson, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development? Was that a surprise?
Well, I don't think that one's final yet, but I think that's what it appears to be. And I guess it is a little bit of surprise.
I was thinking Surgeon General for him.
Well, I was thinking something like that too. He had come out at some point, I don't remember if this was last week or 2 weeks ago, and said, well, I don't think I'm qualified to lead an entire agency, so I'm going to take my name out of the hat. And then he sort of walked that back and said, well, no, I am interested in serving in some capacity. So it's kind of unclear to me what his interests are. HUD seems like an odd position for it. Certainly wouldn't be my top choice if I were in his position. But he was one of the early supporters of Trump after he sort of hung his cap up after the primaries.
Yeah, he jumped right on that train.
He jumped right on that train, and as did Chris Christie. But as we can see with Christie, that didn't necessarily translate into a political advantage when rubber hit the road here.
But I still have a problem with Christie. I liked him several years ago, but during the last election, where he walks off into the sunset with President Obama, After
Oh yeah,
I
with
don't know. I just,
the big old bear hug with the two. Yeah, that was a
yeah,
symbolic moment. I remember
yeah.
Rand Paul giving him
I do too.
a lot of grief about that. He said some funny. I think that was
They
shortly
walk
thereafter he
hand in
called him the.
hand out into the sunset.
Yeah, well, it was shortly after that where they called him. I think Rand Paul called him the king of pork or something
Yeah.
like that, or the pork governor.
Yeah.
Something pretty funny, but
Yeah. They
um,
had quite the relationship there.
yeah,
How
it
about
is.
National
But
Security Advisor? Who's up for that?
I think a lot of the people that are up for Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense are probably being bandied about for that as well. So, I don't think that I don't think someone like Mitt Romney would be in that category, but someone like Petraeus is quite possibly on that
Well,
list.
he mentioned Michael Flynn.
And Michael Flynn, it would certainly be there. Rudy Giuliani's been promised something apparently, and whether that's Secretary of State or something else,
I
I
think
don't
he
know.
would be a great Secretary of State.
Well, he's got a lot of interesting leadership experience. I think right now the criticism coming in his direction is that he, since he has left public life, he's been involved in private firms doing work, advising foreign governments, and I think the concern is that it will give the impression, if Trump picks him, that he'll have entanglements in the way that Hillary Clinton might have in the Clinton Foundation, and I think that's one of the concerns they have with him. But John Kelly is a retired general of the Marine Corps. I could see someone like that being a possibility. Stanley McChrystal, David Petraeus, Dana Rohrabacher is a U.S. representative from California, and he's chaired the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Europe and Eurasia, and so he's somebody that knows foreign policy. John Bolton is the name that got thrown around for Secretary of State. He was the UN ambassador under W. Bush, but I think he is just too much of a lightning rod. He is sort of associated with that neoconservative variety of conservatism, and as a sort of West Coast Straussian, and that just doesn't appeal to everybody. That's sort of a narrow subset of the conservative movement, and so I would see some opposition to him. One interesting person. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one interesting person that I've heard discussed for various positions is Jim Webb, and he was in the running against Hillary for the
him.
Democratic.
I'm telling you, I would have voted for him. I liked him.
Well, he has a lot of the same appeal that Trump has, and I think he would have drawn a lot of the same Trump voters. And he's a former Republican. He served in the Reagan administration. He has a lot of foreign policy experience, not only as a U.S. senator but as Secretary of the Navy. So I could see someone like that finding his way into
I would have voted for that guy. I liked him. He just never got enough time. They're always during the debates. He got no time.
Well, and that always felt a little bit deliberate to me. It always seemed as though the Democrat, and as it turns out, we learned a lot more since then. That they with CNN sending questions to the Hillary campaign and stuff. It does seem as though in some ways at least the Democratic primaries and caucuses were somewhat rigged.
Yeah, it seems that way.
So as much heat as Trump got for saying that about the general election, it does seem as though there are elements of a rigged election in the Democratic primaries. That thing seemed to have been set up for Hillary.
Yeah, just someone with common sense would think that. Absolutely. We just had a text in just a few seconds ago about your thoughts of Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State.
Oh, no. No. I'm pretty sure that ship has sailed for Hillary Clinton. I
don't think it's going to happen.
No, I don't think so. And she's going to be, with all the investigations still going on with the Clinton Foundation, it doesn't seem to be the most politically savvy thing for her to join Jill Stein's election recount challenge in Wisconsin. But
do you think that Jill Stein is just taking the hit? She's taking the fall. The whole thing is Hillary. Do you think she's being paid to do that?
Well,
because really, what could benefit her?
Just probably name recognition. She's got I mean, as the candidate of the Green Party, she's got a base that she needs to appeal to, and this just allows her to stay in the news a little longer. It allows her to stay popular and do the things that her constituents would like. And I think it's a little bit of grandstanding more than it is any real hope of accomplishing something with
Well,
this.
if you were Hillary, if you were in Hillary's shoes right now, would you be on that bandwagon?
Quite frankly, I can't even imagine what it would be like in Hillary Clinton's shoes. I have no idea what's going on. But, I guess maybe if I were in her position, the thing is you would have to challenge more states than Wisconsin. I mean, if it were already a done deal that you were challenging Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan and then Wisconsin, which is another one. But, even if she were to get Wisconsin, which is not going to happen. I mean, realistically, that's just not going to happen. But let's just say in some hypothetical world it did happen. Well, then Trump still wins. So it doesn't strike me as being the wisest move. And in fact, I think it just sort of
still
sort of
grasping
ironic.
for straws. I mean, is that what she's doing?
I think it's grasping for straws, and I think it's ironic in light of the fact that during the debates, she called Donald Trump's answer horrifying. That he said, "Well, I'll wait and see whether I'll accept the results of the election. We'll just wait and see." And she called that answer horrifying, and went on the media circuit after that, just decrying Trump and bashing him for that answer. And then here she is doing just that. So. I mean, not that I'm surprised by that. Hillary Clinton has never struck me as a principled person. She just struck me as somebody who was in it for power and prestige, and never really formed a platform and never really held long-standing views, and it could just sort of, like a chameleon, change colors according to the political climate. But
because and this is another thing I noticed about Hillary Clinton, when she's speaking to a group, her voice sounds like the group she's talking to. I mean, she can. Am I saying that in a nice way?
Yeah,
she
no,
does. I mean, it's just like, is that really her?
Well, and with her, it seems so fake. And I've seen some people that can do that and turn it on and turn it off, and it can be.
Now, her husband
sort of
could. He could do
it.
He
could.
He was very
could do
good
it.
at it.
That's right.
I think she's trying to be like him, and she can't.
Yeah, that probably wasn't probably not a good thing to try. Yeah.
Not going to happen. What are your thoughts about Treasury Secretary?
Well, that's a tough one.
Tim Polani?
That's possible. My personal favorite is John Allison. He was a CEO of BB&T. He had all his employees, well, maybe not all his employees, but he had certain employees read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged as just part of what they did for their job. He was president and CEO of the Cato Institute. And full disclosure, I was an adjunct legal associate at the Cato Institute for half a year in 2009. But I say this as someone that's been gone from there a long time and was not there when he was there. But I like him. I think he has a lot of interesting business experience. He does come from the private sector. He has a demonstrated record of leadership, and he has a philosophical commitment that a lot of people that you hear for those kinds of positions lack. I mean, some of the other names I've heard about, I think the one that the media is wanting to criticize the most is the Steve Mnuchin, Goldman Sachs partner, because they just want to say Trump is linked to big business and all these kinds of things. So I think that's the one that the media is hoping for, because they really want somebody that they can attack Trump on.
Well, Ted Cruz's wife was linked to Goldman Sachs.
That's right. Yeah, and it's tough to a certain point. It's she's got a great job. She does she's a very smart, successful woman. I did hate to see Donald Trump stoop low and criticize her in the primaries. That I thought was inappropriate and beneath him, frankly. But You know, I don't think that would have been a problem had Ted Cruz been the nominee and had he run. I really don't think there would have been any kind of entanglement or problems. I mean, she clearly would have left Goldman Sachs. She was on temporary leave anyway.
So do you think President-elect Trump and Ted Cruz have kissed and made up?
You know, I don't know. I was at the Federal Society National Lawyers Convention, not this past weekend, Thanksgiving weekend, but the weekend before, and Ted Cruz spoke, and he had met with Trump. I don't know how much they, kissed and made up, but they, I think there's an understanding on his part that history does not happen in 4 years. That the conservative movement is a long-term project, and that conservatism, by definition, involving perennial values and mores and traditions and religious beliefs, is not something that's just about short-term political gains. I think Ted Cruz understands that, and I think he understands that the political battle he's in is a lifetime battle and not just something that's going to happen in this one election. So, I think he's cautiously optimistic that Trump will assemble a team of people who are trustworthy and committed to conservative principles. And quite frankly, I would love to see Senator Cruz on the United States Supreme Court. I know he's not on Trump's list of 21.
That's where I see him.
Well, and it would be in keeping with his commitment to the long-term principles of conservatism, because the Supreme Court is all about longevity, and Supreme Court opinions have effects for decades.
We're going to have to go into a break. Can you hang around just a few minutes? Let's go into a few commercials, and we'll be right back in just a few seconds.
All right.
And I bet you are singing in the rain right now with Alan Mendenhall, who's the Associate Dean and Executive Director of Blackstone and Burke Center for Law and Liberty. How about that?
Well, thanks, Donna. It's fun to be here, as always. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, we love having you on the show, and it's always great. And all the information. And I wanted to mention something else, too, also, as well. Now, you're the president of the Montgomery Federalist Society chapter.
Yes, that's right. The Federalist Society has 3 chapters in Alabama, one in Birmingham, one in Montgomery, and one in Mobile, and I'm the president of the Montgomery chapter. And the Federalist Society, I mentioned when we were before the break earlier that I was at the National Federal Society Lawyers Convention a couple weekends ago, and for people who don't know what the Federal Society is, it's an organization of conservatives and libertarians who work to reform the American legal system according to conservative and libertarian principles. I think the mission statement says that the society is founded on the principles that the state exists to preserve freedom, that the separation of governmental powers is central to the Constitution, and that it's the province and duty of the judiciary to say what the law is, not what it should be. And there have been several influential members of the Federal Society over the years, including Supreme Court justices like Justice Scalia, Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, and people like Judge Robert Bork and Edmund Meese and many others have been involved with the society. Ted Cruz over the years. And we have a chapter in Montgomery, and we have our December luncheon this Friday. We actually hold a luncheon every single month, and we bring in speakers from all around the country to come to Montgomery and speak on really a wide variety of issues. Our speaker on Friday is a professor named Teresa Stanton Collette, and she's at St. Thomas Law School in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and she is going to be speaking on ways that states can sort of push back against federal overreach, and she'll be doing that in the context of issues like human life and the family, marriage, religion, bioethics, these sorts of things. That's sort of her wheelhouse. So I'm really looking forward to that. She is a very, very much sought after speaker, She's represented Ron Paul before, and other medical groups in defense of the federal ban of partial birth abortion, and she's represented the governors of Minnesota and North Dakota, defending the state requirement of parental notification before abortion, and she's done a lot of stuff. So we're really excited to have her down, and we do those, as I said, monthly. This week's is Friday, December 2nd, at the Capital City Club in downtown Montgomery at 11:30, and it's open to anyone. It's not just lawyers that come to these. People from all sorts of professions and jobs and occupations come to hear our speakers, and it's just $15 at the door. Checks could be made payable to the Capital City Club, and all are invited to come to these. They start at 11:30, and typically we are out by 1 o'clock.
Wow, I wish I could go.
Well, they're great. They really are. They're great. We've had, like I said, we've had speakers from think tanks and universities and public office from around the country, and then we've also had some of our local people, like Judge Pryor from the 11th Circuit and Attorney General Luther Strange, and several judges have spoken.
Wow, a very interesting event, and congratulations on your part. So I know you're.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
We had some folks who sent text while we're
Okay.
on breaks, and they're very interesting in your opinion on the cabinet choices, President-elect Donald Trump. And one was, and I'm having to distinguish what this is, Director of National Intelligence. And from what I've seen, Giuliani and Michael S. Rogers. So what are your thoughts on that one?
Well, so this is not Secretary of Homeland Security and not Secretary of State of
Director.
Defense.
And I didn't know about this one, so I had to look this one up. Director of National Intelligence.
So the interesting thing about that position is I do not believe that one is one that requires Senate confirmation. So Trump would have a little more latitude to pick someone of his choosing. And I think some of the names that we mentioned earlier. Who were the two that you just mentioned? I've already forgotten.
Giuliani and
Giuliani.
Yeah, and then Michael S. Rogers.
Yeah, Mike Rogers. So it's some of the same people that have been considered for the other positions: Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and even National Security Advisor, which is also one that does not need the Senate. Does not require the advice and consent of the Senate. But yeah, I see it's some of those same names that get tossed around there. So I just have a feeling that one of those individuals is going to get those spots. I mean, unless there's just somebody that's just off the radar that the media just is not even thinking about. But they have a pretty good idea of who's coming in and out of Trump Tower right now, or whoever's in Palm Beach or wherever they're meeting with President-elect Trump.
It's almost a who's who of gallery of people who are coming in and out of Trump Towers.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It's
fun to see who is coming in and out of there.
Oh yeah, there have been so many people. I'm not surprised that more cabinet members haven't been named yet because, I think about what I do on a day-to-day basis and how many people I talk to on the phone and do, have meetings with and have lunch appointments with. And then my day gets eaten up really fast. I can't imagine with his list and all the people he has to meet with and with his entire transition team up there laboring away and how he would have any time to make these decisions. One thing I kind of like is that he's not doing what Obama does, which is Obama would get out his gigantic binders and then go walk out in front of all the reporters with a really stern, serious face and make a big show of how I'm going to go home and read these gigantic binders tonight. And,
oh, come on!
It was so.
It's like we have to pass Obamacare to know what's in it. Because it's how many binders. Now, what are your thoughts about Sarah Palin? Does she fit in anywhere?
She's clearly being talked about, and she was clearly a big supporter. I've heard her mentioned for Secretary of the Interior is what I heard her mentioned
I heard
for.
that one.
And
with Jan Brewer,
yeah, with Jan Brewer. Yeah,
former
it
governor of
seems like the
Arizona.
Secretary of Interior has some of those former governors that are there. Actually, the current governor of Oklahoma, Mary Fallin, I think, is on that list. And I guess if you had to say that, if you said, okay, Sarah Palin's definitely going to get a cabinet position, and you started from that premise, I would assume Secretary of the Interior would be, a plausible landing spot for her.
No Secretary of State for her,
No, yeah, nothing like that. I
where
don't
she could
think.
push
But
a button or.
yeah,
I like
yeah,
her. I mean, I know she's taken a lot of flack, but I met
yeah,
her
she
in
has.
Charlotte, North Carolina, and she's awesome. It's just she just looks so much like that chick on Saturday Night Live, and people were watching that segment, and so many things they were saying she said on Saturday Night Live she did not say. She's very intelligent.
Yeah. Well, she was the governor. I mean, she's the
For
executive of an
God's
entire
sakes.
state, the state of Alaska, which
Hmm.
is a big oil state. It's and there's a lot of moneyed interest there that you have to navigate, and you just aren't the governor of a state for nothing. I mean, it
Hmm.
takes it takes some leadership to get to those positions, and I understand why people would give her a hard time, and maybe sometimes she doesn't do the best with interviews, but interviews are not
But it's
interviews are
mostly
tough.
jealous women, though. I mean, who give her such a hard time.
It could be.
I mean, I hate to say
I
that because I'm a
don't know.
woman, but that's what
I
I've
don't know.
noticed is
Uh,
jealous women who do that to her. I
well,
think
I'm
she has
probably
it
not
all.
the.
She's got that total
I,
package.
well, I'm certainly no expert in that. I can tell you that much. So I don't know about all that, but if she finds something in the administration, I would suspect it to be something like that. I mean, it may not even be a cabinet position; it may be something else. But there are a ton of appointments that have to get made.
Hmm.
They're just unpaid appointments. I mean, even the National Endowment for Humanities has people in there that have to be appointed, and they're appointed. There's just so many different ways and to get in an administration that people just don't even talk about. So there's no telling what she'll get. I'm sure she'll get something because
Hmm.
she was an outspoken supporter of Trump. Went on all the shows and supported him, and really rallied voters towards him. So she'll probably get some sort of reward for that, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think so. And also Mike Huckabee.
And Mike Huckabee
He was
too.
there all
Yeah.
the
Well,
way. I mean, he from the very beginning. I mean, I think he was even pumping him up when he was running. It
well,
appeared that way.
I remember there was there was some press conference where Huckabee and Santorum, Huckabee and Santorum showed up on the stage with Donald Trump. I wish I could remember what that was. It was after the debates. Maybe it was the people that didn't make the first tier of the debate, and it was the debate that Donald Trump had skipped.
Right.
That's what I think it was. I think it was the debate that Donald Trump had skipped. And rather than debating, he was going to hold his own
Hmm.
press conference, and then Huckabee showed up. Maybe I hope I'm remembering that correctly. But
You are. I remember that exactly. And I'm
yeah,
thinking, are you running? Are you running? Are you
are you
helping
campaigning for him?
Trump?
Yeah, it sure looked like it. I remember the people on TV saying
Well,
stuff like that too.
yeah.
But I've heard Huckabee's name getting thrown around for Secretary of Health and Human Services, which
Mhm.
sounds like something that Ben Carson would have been a good fit for.
Yeah.
But Huckabee would bring an interesting style of social conservatism to that office. That would be just really interesting to see what he could do there. Tom Price, who was a medical doctor, is
He's
actually
from Georgia, isn't he?
He's from Georgia, and
Mhm.
he's actually he's from the 6th congressional district in Georgia, which is the district that I grew up in when I was a kid. I was from Marietta, Georgia,
Mhm.
originally, and so he's my parents'
Mhm.
congressman, and actually when I was in college, I came back home for a summer and worked for a law firm. And one of the partners of that law firm was running against Tom Price for that position. His name was Chuck Clay, and Chuck Clay ended up losing, and Tom Price ended up winning and becoming the congressman for that district. So it was always interesting to look back at that time and see how Tom Price got to that position while I was just, a college intern in the office of one of his rivals. But I like Tom Price. I think being a medical doctor gives him a lot of credibility. And of course, he was one of the most vocal critics of Obamacare, and he had quite a platform to speak on, being a medical doctor, somebody that had that experience, as did someone like Rand Paul and Ron Paul, who also are doctors and could speak with some interesting authority.
And there's Rick Scott too. He's the Florida governor.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
He has something to do with the hospital chain. He's the CEO, I think.
Yeah, he has hospital. He has experience in the hospital industry. That's right. He's not a doctor. I don't think. But
so, what would be the better fit, a doctor or a CEO of hospital chain?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's that's a good question.
I keep going CEO because I'm thinking business decisions.
Well, and I think Trump probably is too. I mean, I really think Trump is looking for people that can go in and look at these federal agencies as a business and maybe trim some of the fat where possible, and get rid of programs that are essentially wasteful.
Well, you know something, I know how to chop it all. I know how to take care of it all within a year.
How's that?
I know. Fair tax.
Okay, yeah, that's
I love the idea of fair tax. We have Chuck Bailey and his wife Mary Lynn on the show often, and we talk about fair tax. And by the way, Mike Huckabee is all for fair tax.
Interesting.
So it would be, look it up. I mean, he is, and I met Mike Huckabee, by the way, in Charlotte First Baptist Church. And nice guy. I mean, you couldn't ask for anyone nicer. Autographed book and the whole works. And but I could, with his thoughts on fair tax, and if that could be worked into the administration some way, I mean, you could be the king of all heroes of the world, because the whole thing makes business sense to me. You do away with the IRS. Everybody pays, whether you're legal or not. You pay tax on what you buy if it's a new item.
Well, I think it's a very interesting concept. I really do. And I suspect we're going to see a lot of changes in the IRS. And I hope we see a lot of changes in the IRS. I think that I think the Internal Revenue Service has really gone out of control and targeting conservatives. And,
well, we were targeted. We've moved back, and this is something in the year 2000, I think. And we got a notice about 2 years ago, said we owe $10,000. And for what? And so I give them a call, being very nice, of course. You don't want to call yelling at people because they'll, you'll get into trouble that way. But asked what it was all about. And they said it was a business we owned. We didn't turn in W-2s, and it was a guesstimate. The guesstimate started out as $1,000-something, blossomed into a cool $10,000.
Oh, wow.
And we're hoping we didn't have the proof, and we did. We moved from Charlotte, North Carolina back to Alabama in 2013, and I almost threw those things away. I said, they only go back 7 years. And so my husband said, no, they go back whenever they want to. And so we argued about that. He won the argument. I'm glad he won that one because all I had to do was provide that, and they zeroed it out.
Wow.
And
that's a good story for people to hear.
Yeah, that they go back that far. I thought it was only 7 years.
Yeah, that's traditional wisdom. I guess it's not.
So I asked
must
someone
not
else.
Be policy. But.
Well, I asked someone else about that. Who knows? Is in that business, and they said no, they can go back as far as they want to.
Wow.
So I tell everybody, hold on to everything you have.
That's right. Well, I think that's generally good policy. And now that we have computers, you can always just scan everything in and have electronic copies, so you don't have a filing cabinet that's just overflowing. And
we don't have a file cabinet.
Yeah, you probably have several filing cabinets. But
hold on to it. But yeah, those things happen, and they were targeting conservatives. I don't care what anybody says. I'd like to see the whole thing done away with.
No, there's no doubt. I know Becky Garrettson here in Wetumpka, right down the road, actually, is has become actually pretty famous. Gone on several national TV shows to talk about how the Wetumpka Tea Party was targeted, and of course, the ACLJ, the American Center for Law and Justice, that Jay Sekulow runs, represented a number of organizations to fight back against the IRS for those kinds of things. And there are foundations like the Earhart Foundation, a big, major foundation that did a lot of great philanthropic work and gave a lot of money out to educational institutions and centers and organizations. Had to basically close up shop because they were afraid they were, going to be targeted by the IRS. So the IRS is responsible for actually putting great philanthropic organizations out of business, which is for pure politics, which should not happen. I mean, that's the type of stuff. That's Soviet Union kind of stuff, and it's happened right here in the United States under Barack Obama.
Yeah, that's and if you are a business owner, I can't see. I didn't vote for him either time. And also the polls. Has anyone ever called you and asked your opinion on polls?
No,
okay,
I have never received
a
call from a pollster. I never have.
I have. We were living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this was Obama's second term, and running for office, second time around. And so the questions they were asking me were to get me to answer a certain way. Is the way they were asked. So I saw where it was leading, and I said, I'm not trying to be rude to you, but I'm very busy right now, and all of your questions are leading me to be in favor of Barack Obama, and I'm not. And I said, good day, and then I hung up.
Well, it's funny because the polling, clearly something is wrong with the polling industry.
Well, we saw it didn't work this time. It was wrong.
It didn't work this time on the presidential election. It was off on Brexit up until just hours before the day, before the day of the Brexit and the day of the presidential election. The polls should not be that far off. I've heard some arguments say, well, if you take into account the margin of error, what the polls were predicting still fell within that. But so maybe it's the way that the polls get reported. Maybe they ought to be reporting more on the range rather than giving you a set percentage, saying so and so is going to do this by a certain point, or this is going to happen by there's this percentage point on how this vote's going to turn out. But
I think it's a way of leading the masses, because I think people want to vote for whatever they think is popular.
I think that's probably true.
And I think it's a way to lead you around by the nose.
Well, and I think exactly what you were saying earlier is the way questions are framed can be leading or misleading. And the other thing is that, it's tough to see how you take a representative poll these days when some of the polling is done by landlines only. Well, I don't know many 21-year-olds say that have landlines. I don't really know many 21-year-olds at all, but I'm sure that they only have cell phones, and they're not going to be included in that poll. So,
Alan, we're going to have to call it a day. Thank you so much for being on the show. I always have a blast with you on here. I have with me Associate Director and Executive Director, or Associate Dean and Executive Director, Alan Mendenhall. He's with the Blackstone and Burke Center for Law and Liberty. Thank you again so much for being on the show.
Thanks,
it's been
Donna.
Awesome. Everybody have a good and safe night.